The jet sliced through the crimson dawn, carrying Adrian Vale and Isla Morno toward Aurora Isle, a paradise with a hidden past. Nobody knew that its skis still guarded a World War II secret, one that could unravel wealth, power, and even the love they thought untouchable. One wrong turn, one curious glance at the flight paths, and everything would change. Adrian pressed his palm against the cool window of his Gulfstream G650, watching the Pacific Ocean transform from obsidian to amber beneath them. At 42, he'd conquered Silicon Valleys and stock markets, built empires from algorithms and ambition. But the woman sleeping in the cream leather seat across from him, her dark hair spilling across her shoulders like ink on parchment, she was the only conquest that had ever truly mattered. Isla stirred, her hazel eyes blinking open. How long was I out? 2 hours. We're approaching Vialia Isle now. Adrian's voice carried that familiar warmth reserved only for her, a softness his board members would never recognize. She stretched, the diamond bracelet on her wrist catching the early light. They'd been lovers for 6 months now, kept secret from the tabloids, from his shareholders, from everyone who believed billionaires should marry for mergers, not for the way someone's laugh could remake the entire architecture of your heart. Mr. Vale, the cockpit door opened, and their pilot emerged. Corson Dreth was ex-military, 47, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that seemed to calculate trajectories even when looking at clouds. We have a situation. Adrian straightened. What kind of situation? Air traffic control is redirecting us. There's unusual atmospheric interference around our planned route to Aurora Isle. They're suggesting we take the northern corridor through Vialia Isle's airspace instead. Isla frowned. I thought Vialia was restricted. It was, technically still is, but they've opened a temporary flight window. Corson pulled out a tablet, displaying the adjusted flight path. Thing is, I've flown these waters for 20 years. I've never seen this interference pattern before. It's almost like... Like what? Adrian asked. Corson's jaw tightened, like someone's deliberately jamming signals in that specific area. The aircraft hummed around them, a cocoon of luxury cruising at 41,000 feet. Adrian had purchased Aurora Isle 3 years ago, a private paradise of white sand beaches and crystalline waters, where he and Isla could finally exist without cameras, without judgment. But now, staring at the altered flight path on Corson's screen, he felt something cold settling in his chest. Take the northern route, Adrian decided, but keep everything recorded. If there's something unusual, I want documentation. Corson nodded and returned to the cockpit. Isla moved to sit beside Adrian, her hand finding his. You're worried. I'm curious, he corrected, though they both knew it was the same thing. Vialia Isle has been abandoned since 1947. Why would anyone jam signals around it now? Isla studied the flight path on the display screen still glowing on the table between them. Her background in investigative journalism, the career she'd maintained, even while dating one of the world's wealthiest men, had taught her to recognize patterns others missed. And this pattern was wrong. Adrian, look at this. She traced her finger along the revised route. We're not just skirting Vialia. This path takes us directly over Obrath Cliff. That's the highest point on the island. So that cliff has never appeared on any civilian flight maps. I wrote an article about it 5 years ago, about how certain geographical features in the Pacific were mysteriously omitted from public records. Obrath Cliff was one of them. The jet banked slightly, beginning its descent toward the northern corridor. Through the windows, they could see the first smudges of land appearing on the horizon, dark green against impossible blue. Adrian pulled up his own tablet, accessing databases most people couldn't touch with 100 lawyers. His fingers moved quickly, searching for anything about Vialia Isle, Obrath Cliff, World War II activity in this region. What he found made his blood run cold. Isla, look at this. The document was heavily redacted, declassified only 3 months ago, but what remained visible told a story. In 1944, a joint American-British operation had established a research facility on Vialia Isle. Code name, Project Ebonreach. Purpose, redacted. Personnel, redacted. Outcome, facility abandoned August 1947. Reason, redacted. Ebonreach, Isla whispered. I've heard that name before. Where? She closed her eyes, reaching back through years of research. There was a historian, obsessive type, Lysian Katrev. He gave a lecture at MIT about lost wartime projects. Claimed Ebonreach was developing something that could change the fundamental nature of warfare, but he was laughed out of academic circles, called a conspiracy theorist. The jet shuddered slightly, not turbulence but something else. The lights flickered. Corson's voice crackled over the intercom. We're experiencing electromagnetic interference. Nothing dangerous, but I'm seeing anomalies on the instruments. We are over Vilia now. Adrian and Isla pressed against the windows. Below them, the island emerged like a secret kept in jade and shadow. Dense jungle covered most of the terrain, but there, jutting from the northeastern edge like an accusing finger, stood Obrath Cliff. And at its peak, barely visible through the canopy, were structures. Concrete and steel, weathered but unmistakable. Those aren't natural, Isla breathed. Adrian was already recording everything on his phone, but as they passed directly over the cliff, something extraordinary happened. The morning sun, hitting the jungle at precisely the right angle, revealed what had been invisible from any other position. A pattern in the vegetation itself, trees that had grown in deliberate lines, forming shapes almost like... It's a map, Isla gasped. The whole island. Someone planted trees to create a map visible only from this exact flight path, at this exact time of day. And there, encoded in living green, were coordinates. Numbers that Adrian's mind, trained to recognize patterns in data, immediately began calculating. The jet passed beyond the island, the strange electromagnetic interference fading, but Adrian and Isla remained frozen, staring at the images on his phone. "What are you thinking?" Isla asked quietly. Adrian looked at her, this woman who'd chosen him not for his wealth but for late-night conversations about books and philosophy, for the way he remembered how she took her coffee, for the vulnerability he showed only to her. They were supposed to have a romantic week ahead, champagne and sunset, simplicity and love. But neither of them had ever been able to resist a mystery. "I'm thinking," Adrian said slowly, "that we need to find Lizzie and Katrev. What would you do if you accidentally discovered something that was meant to stay hidden forever? Drop your thoughts below." Aurora Isle welcomed them 3 hours later, with the kind of beauty that belonged on postcards. Powder-white beaches embracing turquoise water, palm trees swaying in the gentle breeze, the modernist villa Adrian had built perched on the hillside like a glass and steel dream. But neither of them could focus on paradise. While staff unpacked their luggage and stocked the villa with champagne and orchids, Adrian sat in his study making encrypted calls. Isla spread her research across the dining table, 15 years of investigative journalism, creating a mosaic of connections most people would never see. "Found him," Adrian announced, entering the room with his phone still pressed to his ear. "Lysian Katrev. He's living in Vancouver, teaching community college history after MIT refused to renew his tenure. He's willing to talk, but only if we come to him." Isla looked up from a 1946 naval document she'd accessed through contacts at the Library of Congress. "We just got here." "I know," Adrian sat across from her, reaching for her hand. "I'm sorry. This was supposed to be our escape. No business, no distractions, just us." She laced her fingers through his. "Adrian, when you showed me that proposal 6 months ago, the one where you wanted to take our relationship public despite what it might do to your stock prices, do you remember what I said? You said that if we were going to be together, we had to be honest. About everything." "Exactly, and honestly, I'm just as hooked on this mystery as you are." She smiled, that brilliant expression that had first caught his attention at a charity gala, when she challenged his views on philanthropy and made him reconsider everything he thought he knew about giving. "Besides, I've been tracking weird military projects for years. This might be the biggest story of my career." "Or the most dangerous," a voice said from the doorway. They both turned. A woman stood there, tall and elegant in a white linen suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, pale blue and calculating, swept across the room with the precision of someone who missed nothing. "Cerilyn Quor," Adrian said, his voice hardening. "How did you get past security?" "The same way I always do, darling, by owning half of it." Cerilyn stepped into the room uninvited, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Did you really think you could buy an island in my territory without me noticing?" Cerilyn Quor was many things: real estate magnate, art collector, rival billionaire, but most importantly to Adrian, she was his ex-fiancée. Their engagement had ended 5 years ago when he discovered she'd only wanted access to his tech patents, not him. The betrayal had left scars that Isla had spent months helping him heal. "This is private property," Isla said, standing. "You're trespassing." Cerilyn's laugh was like crystal breaking. Oh, the little journalist, how quaint. She turned back to Adrian. "I'm here as a courtesy, actually, to warn you." "About what?" "About asking questions regarding Vilia Isle." Cerilyn pulled out her own phone, displaying a photograph that made Adrian's blood freeze. It was him and Isla, taken from inside the jet, looking out the window at Obrath Cliff. "Taken this morning. You're not the only one with access to flight data, Adrian. and you're not the only one interested in what's hidden there. Isla moved closer to Adrian, her journalistic instincts screaming, "You've been watching us." "I've been watching Vilia for 3 years, ever since a certain archivist approached me with information about Project Ebonreach." Saralyn set her phone down on the table, the image still glowing. Her name was Ilaris Vane. She worked in the Naval Archives in Washington, past tense because 6 months ago she disappeared. Adrian felt Isla's hand tighten in his. 6 months ago, right when they'd started dating, right when someone had begun declassifying obscure World War II documents. "What did she tell you?" Adrian asked. Saralyn walked to the window, looking out at the perfect Pacific sunset. "She told me that Project Ebonreach wasn't just a research facility, it was a vault, the Crovath Vault specifically, a repository for something the Allied powers discovered during the war, something so valuable, so dangerous that they couldn't risk it falling into Soviet hands during the Cold War. So they hid it on Vilia Isle and erased the island from most official records." "What kind of something?" Isla demanded. "That's what Ilaris was trying to find out when she vanished." Saralyn turned back to them, and for the first time something like genuine emotion flickered across her perfect features. "Fear. 3 days before she disappeared, she sent me a message. Just 2 words, Draxon lives." The name hit Adrian like a physical blow. He'd seen it in the redacted documents. Draxon Solvi, a name that appeared in footnotes and classified appendices, always accompanied by warnings and black bars of censorship. "Who is Draxon Solvi?" Isla asked, already pulling out her own phone to search. "You won't find him in any database," Saralyn said. "I've tried, but from what Ilaris pieced together, he was some kind of operative during World War II. British intelligence, maybe OSS. He was assigned to Vilia Isle in 1945 and never left. The official records say he died in 1947 when the facility was abandoned, but Ilaris believed otherwise." Adrian's mind was racing, connecting pieces. "You think he's still alive? That's impossible. He'd be over 100 years old." "I think," Saralyn said carefully, "that whatever is in the Crovath Vault is worth killing for, worth disappearing for, worth living in secret on an abandoned island for 78 years for." She picked up her phone, swiping to another image. This was taken by a fishing boat 2 months ago. They got too close to Vilia's waters and were warned off by someone claiming to be Coast Guard, but look at the timestamp on their camera. The image showed a figure on Obrath Cliff, silhouetted against the setting sun. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. when the sun shouldn't have been setting at all. But more disturbing was what the fishermen had captured in the background: lights inside the supposedly abandoned structures on the cliff, and something else. A tower, thin and dark, that hadn't been visible in any of Adrian's aerial footage this morning. "Ebonreach spire," Saralyn whispered. "Ilaris's last words to me. She said to look for the spire, that's where the truth is." Isla was already mapping coordinates, cross-referencing the fishing boat's position with the tree pattern they'd seen from the jet. The coordinates from the aerial map, they don't point to Obrath Cliff, they point 3 miles south, to Thrin Hollow. "What's Thrin Hollow?" Adrian asked. "A bay on the southern edge of Vilia. It's supposed to be too shallow for boats to access. But," Isla zoomed in on a satellite image, her eyes widening. "Look at this. The water depth here is all wrong. Someone's been dredging, recently." Saralyn moved behind them to see the screen. For a moment, the 3 of them stood in strange alliance, united by curiosity and the kind of mystery that made powerful people forget their rivalries. "So what do we do?" Saralyn asked quietly. Adrian looked at Isla, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. They'd come here for romance, for peace, for a week away from the world, but the world and history had found them anyway. "We go to Vilia," Adrian said, "tomorrow at first light." "You're insane," Saralyn said, but there was admiration in her voice. "The island is restricted. You'll need special clearance, equipment, probably armed security." "I have all of that," Adrian interrupted. "And I have something else. Corson Dreth, our pilot. He flew reconnaissance missions in this region during his military career. If anyone can navigate Vilia's waters and airspace safely, it's him." Isla was already texting their pilot. "He's in. He says he's been curious about Vilia for 20 years. Saralyn studied them both for a long moment. Then she did something Adrian never expected. She smiled, a real smile, not the calculated expression she wore at board meetings and galas. "I'm coming with you," she announced. "Absolutely not," Adrian said immediately. "Adrian, I've been researching this longer than you have. I have Ilaris's notes, her contacts, information you can't access." Saralyn's voice turned sharp. "And like it or not, some of those structures on Vilia Isle are on land I technically own. The property lines are complicated, but I have legal claim to at least part of the island." How? Isla demanded. Through a shell company I acquired in 2019. I didn't even know what I was buying at the time, just land parcels that seemed undervalued. It wasn't until Alaris contacted me that I realized what I'd stumbled into. Saralyn pulled out a legal document from her designer handbag. So you can go without me, but I can also cause legal problems that will delay you by weeks, or we can work together, just this once. Adrian wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him not to trust Saralyn Kaur, but Isla touched his arm, gave him that look that meant she had an idea. Fine, Isla said before Adrian could protest, but we set the rules. We share all information, no secrets, and whatever we find, we decide together what to do with it. Saralyn extended her hand. Deal. They shook on it, three people who had every reason to be enemies, bound together by a mystery that had been waiting 78 years to be solved. After Saralyn left, promising to return at dawn with equipment and her own security team, Adrian pulled Isla close. The sunset had faded to purple twilight, and the villa's lights cast warm shadows across her face. Are you sure about this? He asked. We could still just ignore it, have our vacation, let someone else unravel Project Ebonreach. Isla kissed him softly. Adrian Vale, in the 6 months I've known you, I've learned that you're brilliant, generous, and sometimes infuriatingly stubborn. But the thing I love most about you, you can't see an impossible puzzle without needing to solve it. It's what made you a billionaire. It's what makes you you. I love you, he said, the words still new enough to make his heart race. I love you too, which is why tomorrow we're going to Vialia Isle, together. That night, neither of them could sleep. They lay in the master suite, watching the moon paint silver across the ocean, both thinking about trees that formed maps and historians who disappeared and secrets that waited in vaults beneath abandoned islands. Somewhere to the north, Vialia Isle kept its silence. But not for much longer. Have you ever had to choose between the safe path and the one that called to your curiosity? What did you choose? The helicopter cut through the morning mist, carrying 4 passengers toward Vialia Isle. Corson flew with the precision of someone who'd navigated hostile territories, while Adrian, Isla, and Saralyn studied maps and documents spread across their laps. There, Corson's voice crackled through their headsets, Thrin Hollow coming into view. The bay emerged from the jungle like a secret, a crescent of dark water surrounded by cliffs covered in vegetation, so thick it looked artificial. And perhaps it was. As they descended, Isla could see what the satellites had missed. The trees here weren't random. They formed patterns, barriers, camouflage for something hidden beneath. That's not natural, Saralyn said, pointing to a section of cliff face that seemed too smooth, too regular. It's a door, Adrian realized, carved into the rock and covered with moss. You'd never see it from sea level. Corson set the helicopter down on a rare patch of flat ground near the beach. The moment they stepped out, the jungle seemed to swallow all sound except the rhythmic crash of waves against stone. According to Alaris's notes, Saralyn said, consulting her tablet, there should be an entrance to the underground facility somewhere in this area. The Crovath vault was built into the natural cave system beneath Vialia. They moved into the jungle, following coordinates that were 78 years old. Adrian had brought ground-penetrating radar equipment, the kind used in archaeological surveys. Isla documented everything with her camera, her journalistic training making her notice details others might miss, scuff marks on stones that suggested recent passage, broken branches at precisely human height, footprints in mud that hadn't fully eroded. Someone's been here, she whispered, recently. Adrian saw it too. His security training, mandatory for anyone whose net worth attracted kidnapping attempts, made him acutely aware of being watched. He couldn't see anyone, couldn't hear anything unusual, but his instincts screamed that they weren't alone. There, Saralyn said suddenly, pointing at what looked like a natural rock formation. But as they approached, Adrian's radar equipment went haywire. Something massive was buried beneath this spot, something metal and definitely man-made. Corson knelt examining the rocks. His military experience showed in the way he tested stones, looking for weight distribution, hidden mechanisms. It's a concealed entrance. See how this boulder sits? It's not actually resting on the ground, it's counterweighted. Together they found the trigger, a stone that pressed inward, activating machinery that had been dormant for decades. The boulder began to roll aside with a grinding sound that made them all flinch. Behind it, stairs descended into darkness that smelled of salt water and something else, something metallic and cold. We should call this in, Corson said. Get proper authorities. To report what? Saralyn countered. That we trespassed on restricted land and broke into a classified military facility. We'd be arrested before we learned anything. Adrian pulled out flashlights, distributing them. We go down, we look. If it's dangerous, we leave immediately and deal with the consequences. Agreed. They agreed because they were all the same, really. Different backgrounds, different motivations, but unified by the kind of curiosity that made people climb mountains and dive into oceans and ask questions everyone else was afraid to ask. The stairs went down 50 feet, carved from living rock. At the bottom, they found a corridor, concrete and steel, surprisingly well-preserved despite decades of abandonment. Emergency lighting still functioned, powered by something, casting everything in sickly yellow-green. How is there still power? Isla wondered aloud. Geothermal, probably, Adrian said, examining conduits that ran along the ceiling. Vialia sits on a volcanic hotspot. If they tapped into that in 1944, and the systems were built to last. The corridor branched. Without discussion, they stayed together, following the main passage deeper into the facility. Rooms opened off the corridor, laboratories with equipment that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced, offices with papers still scattered across desks, even a cafeteria with trays still on tables, as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of lunch. It's like a time capsule, Saralyn breathed. Nothing's been disturbed. But that wasn't quite true. Isla noticed it first, a coffee mug on a desk that had no dust, a chair positioned as if someone had just stood up from it, a logbook with an entry dated 3 days ago. She picked up the logbook with trembling hands. The entry was in English, written in precise handwriting. Perimeter breach detected. Civilian aircraft over Obrath Cliff. Activated jamming protocol. They saw the pattern. They're coming. After all these years, someone is finally coming. Draxon, Adrian whispered. A voice behind them said, not quite. They spun around. A woman stood in the corridor, probably in her 70s, wearing clothes that looked military but bore no insignia. Her grey hair was cropped short, and her eyes held the weariness of someone who'd carried secrets too long. Who are you? Saralyn demanded. Marveth Orin, caretaker of Vialia Isle, keeper of the Crovath Vault, daughter of Draxon Solvi. She looked at each of them in turn, her expression unreadable. I've been waiting for someone to find this place, hopping for it, and dreading it in equal measure. Adrian stepped forward. Your father, is he? Dead, yes, 20 years ago, but before he died he made me promise to continue his work, to guard what's in the vault until the right people came for it. Marveth's gaze settled on Isla. You're Isla Morno. You wrote that article about omitted geographical features. That's when I knew, when someone finally asked the right questions. You've been watching us, Isla said. I've been watching everyone who gets close to Vialia, for 37 years. Marveth gestured down the corridor. Come, you've come this far, you deserve to see what you found, but I warn you, once you know, you can't unknow. The Crovath Vault holds something that will change your understanding of the war, of history, of what's possible. They followed her deeper into the facility, past more laboratories and storage rooms, until they reached a massive steel door. It was covered in warnings in 6 different languages, all saying essentially the same thing: authorized personnel only, deadly force authorized, Project EBONIACH. Marveth placed her palm on a reader beside the door, technology that shouldn't have existed in the 1940s. The door began to open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a room beyond that made Adrian's mind rebel against what he was seeing. The Crovath Vault was a cathedral of metal and light. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, covered in pipes and cables that pulsed with electrical current, but the center of the room held something that made no sense at all. It was a machine, crystalline and metallic, geometric in ways that hurt to look at directly. It hummed with energy, spinning slowly in midair without any visible support. Around it, holographic displays showed data in languages Adrian didn't recognize, and he spoke 9 languages fluently. What is it? He whispered. Marveth's voice was heavy with decades of burden. In 1943, an Allied submarine discovered a Nazi research vessel adrift in the Pacific. The crew was dead, but the cargo hold contained this. The Germans had found it in an archaeological dig in Antarctica. They were trying to weaponize it. Found it? Isla moved closer, her journalist's mind cataloguing impossible details. You mean they didn't build it? No one built it, not in any time frame that makes sense. According to the analysis done here in 1944, this machine is at least 12,000 years old. The words hung in the air like accusations. 12,000 years. That predated most human civilization. That predated everything they thought they knew about technological development. Saralyn, who'd been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. What does it do? Marveth's smile was bitter. That's the question that's haunted this place for 78 years. What they knew was that it processes energy in ways that violate known physics. It can transmute matter at the molecular level. It can generate power sufficient to run a city from a handful of seawater. In 1945, they managed to activate it once for 17 seconds. In that 17 seconds, it changed the fundamental structure of everything within a 100-foot radius. Stone became crystal. Metal became something that didn't appear on the periodic table. And one of the researchers, she paused, her voice catching, one of the researchers touched it and lived for 60 more years without agging a single day. Adrian felt Isla's hand find his, gripping tight. This was impossible. This was everything humanity had dreamed of and feared. This was power beyond measure. Why keep it secret? He asked. This could solve energy crises, cure diseases, revolutionize. Everything, Marvith interrupted. Yes, it could also create weapons that make nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. It could be used to destabilize economies, destroy ecosystems, give whoever controls it power that would make them essentially a god. She looked at the spinning machine with something like love and hatred mixed together. My father spent his entire life trying to understand it. He died still not knowing if humanity is ready for this, if we'll ever be ready. But you brought us here, Isla said. Why now? Because I'm dying. Marvith's words were simple, final. Cancer, I have maybe 3 months, and I can't let this knowledge die with me. The world is changing. Climate change, resource wars, pandemics. Maybe humanity needs this now. Or maybe releasing it will destroy us faster than any of those threats. I don't know anymore. I'm too tired to know. She pulled out a small drive, the kind that stored terabytes of data. Everything is here. My father's research, the original American and British analysis. Every test, every theory, every failure and success from 78 years of study. It's yours now, all of you. Make the decision I can't make. Before anyone could respond, alarms shrieked through the facility. Marvith's expression shifted from weary to alert in an instant. Someone else is here, she said, moving to a control panel. Screens flickered to life, showing security feeds from across the island. On one screen, Adrian saw boats approaching Thrin Hollow, military-style boats moving with purpose. On another, armed personnel were already entering the jungle. Who are they? Serelyn demanded. Marvith's fingers flew across the keyboard. I don't know, but they're using military-grade jamming equipment, and they're armed with weapons that aren't standard issue for any nation I recognize. Isla zoomed in on one of the feeds with her phone camera. The operators wore no insignia, no identifying marks, but their movements were coordinated, professional. This wasn't a government operation stumbling onto Vialia by accident. This was a team that knew exactly what they were looking for. They're here for the machine, Adrian said. How did they know? Marvith's face went pale. Ilaris, the archivist, I thought she was trustworthy when I contacted her 3 years ago, gave her just enough information to start asking questions, but if she talked to the wrong people before she disappeared? Or if the wrong people made her disappear, Serelyn finished grimly, and they've been planning this operation ever since. The security feeds showed the armed team spreading out, some heading for the entrance they'd used, others moving toward Obrath Cliff, probably to secure the island's high ground. There's another exit, Marvith said, already moving, through the underwater cave system. It opens in the ocean about half a mile from here, but we need to move now, and we need to take the research data. What about the machine? Adrian asked. Marvith looked back at the crystalline device, still spinning serenely in its impossible suspension. There are fail-safes. If I activate them, the entire vault will flood with seawater within 10 minutes. The machine itself is indestructible, but it would take them weeks to excavate it from a flooded facility. By then, you could be anywhere in the world. And you? Isla asked quietly. I stay. This is my post. My father's post. It ends with me. Marvith pulled a pistol from her jacket, old but well-maintained. I've been alone on this island for 20 years. I don't intend to leave it. That's suicide, Adrian protested. No, Mr. Vale, that's duty. Marvith handed him the data drive. My father died protecting the secret. He believed that when the right people came, they would know what to do, whether that means sharing it with the world or burying it forever. I'm choosing to believe you're the right people. The alarms grew louder. On the screens, the armed team was entering the facility, moving fast and efficient. They had maybe 5 minutes before they were found. Serelyn grabbed Marvith's arm. Come with us, help us understand this. You can't just... I can and I will. Marvith pulled free gently. The underwater passage leads to a cavern where my father kept a boat, small but fast enough to get you to Aurora Isle. From there, you use Mr. Vale's resources to disappear, study the data, decide what comes next. She looked at each of them in turn, and for what it's worth, I think you'll make the right choice, whatever that is. She hit a button, and a section of the vault floor began to lower, revealing stairs that descended into darkness and the sound of rushing water. "Go," Marvith commanded, "now." Adrian wanted to argue, to find some way to convince her to leave, but Isla pulled him toward the stairs, and Coulson was already descending with his flashlight out. Saralyn hesitated longest, staring at Marvith with an expression Adrian had never seen on her face: respect. "Thank you," Saralyn said simply. "Don't thank me, just make sure this wasn't all for nothing." They descended into the underwater caverns as behind them, Marvith activated the flood protocol. Above, the sound of boots and shouted orders echoed through the facility. The last thing Adrian saw before the vault door sealed was Marvith Orin standing alone before the impossible machine, her pistol ready, her shoulders squared. A soldier to the end, a keeper of secrets deciding that some secrets were worth more than life. Then they were in darkness, rushing through caves that smelled of salt and time, carrying knowledge that could change everything. And behind them, Vilia Isle began to drown. The underwater caverns were a nightmare of narrow passages and freezing water. They waded through sections where the ocean had invaded, swimming through others where the ceiling dropped so low they had to hold their breath and pray. Coulson led with the confidence of someone who'd survived worse during his military career, but even he looked shaken by the time they emerged into the larger cavern Marvith had described. The boat was there, a sleek cigarette boat from the 1990s, kept in perfect condition. Fuel tanks were full, emergency supplies stocked in waterproof containers. Marvith Orin had been preparing for this day for decades. She knew, Isla said quietly, dripping water onto the stone. She always knew she'd send someone away with the secret eventually. Adrian clutched the data drive, which he'd sealed in a waterproof bag before entering the caves. Let's make sure her sacrifice matters. They launched the boat into the early afternoon sun, the engine roaring to life with shocking volume in the enclosed space. The cavern's mouth opened to the ocean on Vilia's southern side, hidden by rock formations that made it invisible from any angle except directly in front. Coulson opened the throttle and they shot across the water toward Aurora Isle. Behind them, Vilia grew smaller. Adrian watched the island shrink into the distance, wondering what was happening in those flooded chambers. Had Marvith survived the initial confrontation, or had she gone down fighting, taking the knowledge of the facility's layout with her? The questions haunted him as Aurora Isle appeared on the horizon. They made it to Adrian's private dock 20 minutes later, soaking wet and exhausted, but there was no time to rest. Those armed operatives had boats, resources, and now they knew someone had reached the vault before them. It would only be a matter of time before they came looking. "We need to leave," Saralyn said, already on her phone. "I have a yacht that can take us to international waters. From there we can." "No," Isla cut her off, and something in her voice made them all turn. "We split up, we're too visible together. Adrian Vale, Saralyn Kaur traveling together. We might as well send up a flare." Adrian hated the logic but recognized its truth. "So what do you propose?" Saralyn goes on her yacht, makes it obvious, creates a distraction. Coulson returns to the mainland on Adrian's jet, also obvious. Isla looked at Adrian. "You and I take the data drive and disappear. Not with your resources, not with anything that can be traced. We become invisible." "I don't know how to be invisible," Adrian said, gesturing at himself. His face had been on magazine covers. His net worth was public knowledge. "But I do." Isla's smile was sharp. "I spent 3 years as a journalist in contested territories. I know how to move through the world without leaving traces. Trust me." He trusted her with his heart. Trusting her with his life seemed like the logical next step. Always. Saralyn looked between them, something unreadable crossing her face. "Fine, I'll lead them on a chase across the Pacific. But what about the data? Shouldn't we make copies, distribute it for safety?" "No copies," Marvith's voice said, crackling from a radio on Coulson's belt. They all froze. Coulson grabbed the radio. "Marvith, you're alive." Her laugh was pained. "For now, barricaded in the control room. They're working on the door, but I've got time. Listen carefully. The data can't be copied. There's encryption embedded that will corrupt any duplication attempt. My father's final security measure. One drive, one chance, don't waste it." "Marvith, we can send help," Adrian said. "My security teams would arrive too late and get themselves killed." "No, Mr. Vale, this is how it ends for me. But before it does, I need to tell you something about the machine, something not in the data." They waited, the only sound the gentle lap of waves against the dock. "My father," Marvith continued, her voice growing weaker, "spent 40 years studying that device. and in his final days he came to a conclusion. The machine isn't just old, it's waiting. Waiting for what? Isla asked. For someone to ask it the right question. It's not a tool, it's closer to an intelligence, an artificial intelligence from a civilization that existed before recorded history, and it won't reveal its full capabilities until someone proves worthy of them. The implications were staggering. Adrian felt his mind reeling. How do you prove worthy to a 12,000-year-old AI? That's what you need to figure out. The data contains hints, patterns my father noticed but never solved. He believed the machine has been waiting for millennia for someone with the right combination of knowledge, morality, and courage to activate it properly. Until then, it will only offer glimpses of what it can do. Gunfire crackled through the radio, shouts in a language Adrian didn't recognize. Marvith, Cerilyn shouted. I'm fine for now. Listen, inside the data there's a file marked Ebonreach Protocol. My father designed it as a test. If you can solve it, you'll understand how to approach the machine. But be warned, others will be looking for the drive. These people who came today, they're not the only ones who know about the Crovath Vault. There are organizations that have been hunting for it since 1947. You've just painted targets on your backs. Maury gunfire, closer now. I have to go, Marvith said. Good luck, and Mr. Vale, Ms. Morneau, my father spent his whole life alone with this secret. Don't make the same mistake. Love each other, trust each other. You'll need both to survive what's coming. The radio went silent. They waited for more, but there was nothing, just static and the distant sound of the ocean. Isla reached for Adrian's hand. He took it, feeling the weight of what they'd inherited. A secret that governments had hidden, a machine that might save or destroy humanity, and enemies they didn't even fully understand yet. We move in 1 hour, he said. Cerilyn, take your yacht west toward Hawaii. Make sure you're seen. Corson, file a flight plan back to Los Angeles but divert to Vancouver. Find Lysian Katrev. Show him enough of the data to get his expertise without revealing everything. We'll need historians who understand this period. And us? Isla asked. We go east, Fiji, then New Zealand. We have contacts there. We go dark and we study this data until we understand what we're dealing with. He looked at the waterproof bag containing the drive. Then we decide. They separated an hour later. Cerilyn's yacht pulled away from Aurora Isle with her standing on the deck, deliberately visible, expensive sunglasses glinting in the afternoon light. She gave them a small nod before turning away. Corson gripped Adrian's hand. Watch your backs. These people, whoever they are, they've been patient for decades. That makes them more dangerous than any enemy I faced in the military. Stay safe, Adrian said. Always do. Then it was just Adrian and Isla, standing in his villa that had been meant for romance and had become something else entirely. A way station on a journey neither of them had planned. Isla opened her laptop, already working. I'm erasing your digital footprint for the next week, cancelling credit cards, spoofing GPS locations, creating false trails. By the time I'm done, you won't officially exist. Adrian watched her work, marveling at the competence hidden behind her beauty. He'd fallen for her intelligence first, but moments like this, watching her casually hack into systems that were supposed to be secure, seeing her mind work through problems with the precision of a chess master, he fell in love all over again. You're staring, she said without looking up. Can you blame me? She glanced at him, smiled. We should probably talk about what happens after this, when the danger is over. We can't exactly go back to quiet dates and weekend getaways. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we were never meant for quiet. Adrian Vale, are you saying you like being chased by mysterious armed operatives and fleeing across the Pacific with stolen ancient technology? I'm saying that as long as I'm with you, even running for our lives feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be. She stopped typing, looked at him fully. You mean that? I've never meant anything more. Isla closed her laptop, crossed to him, kissed him with the kind of intensity that made the world disappear. When they broke apart, she said, when this is over, and it will be over, we'll make sure of it. I want to actually have that vacation we planned. Just us. No mysteries, no danger. Deal, though I'm starting to think you attract danger the way I attract business deals. That's probably true. She opened her laptop again. Okay, transport arranged. We leave in 30 minutes on a cargo ship heading to Fiji. From there, a private plane to New Zealand that's registered to a shell company that doesn't exist. You did all that in the time I was declaring my feelings. I'm an excellent multitasker. They packed light, just essentials, and the data drive that might contain the key to humanity's future or its destruction. Adrian took one last look at his villa, this symbol of wealth and success that suddenly seemed so small compared to what they carried. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You have something that belongs to us. Return it and live, run and die. You have 48 hours. He showed it to Isla. "Well," she said, "I guess we know they're tracking us somehow." "How? I haven't used any of my regular devices since we left Vialia." Isla's eyes widened. The data drive, what if it has a tracker? They pulled it out, examining it under Adrian's high-powered magnifier. There, almost invisible, was a chip embedded in the drive's casing. Not just a tracker, but something more sophisticated. A transmitter that broadcasted their location every 60 seconds. Marveth knew, Adrian breathed. She knew they could track it. That's why she insisted no copies. She wanted us to have the original, wanted us to lead them away from Vialia while the facility flooded. "She sacrificed herself twice," Isla said softly. "Once to guard the secret, and again to make sure the machine stayed hidden even if the data was found." Adrian made a decision. He pulled out his multi-tool, carefully prying the tracker from the drive's casing. It came free with a small pop of broken adhesive. "What are you doing?" Isla asked. "Leading them somewhere they can't follow." He walked to the dock, drew back his arm, and threw the tracker as far into the ocean as he could. It splashed down and sank immediately. "Now they think we're at the bottom of the Pacific. That buys us maybe 12 hours before they figure out the ruse. Then we'd better move fast." They left Aurora Isle as the sun set, two silhouettes disappearing into the evening, carrying secrets that could change the world. Behind them, the tracker sent its final signals from the ocean floor. And somewhere in the darkness of the Pacific, those who hunted them adjusted their course, following the signal to its source, not yet realizing they'd been deceived. The game had begun. If you had information that could change everything but also put you in danger, would you fight to share it or hide it to stay safe? Let me know below. New Zealand welcomed them with rain, not the gentle sort, but the kind that fell like judgment, turning the streets of Wellington into rivers of grey. They'd been in the country for 3 days, holed up in a safe house Isla had arranged through contacts from her journalism days, people who knew how to hide sources. How to make investigations disappear when necessary. Adrian had barely slept. Every waking hour was spent poring over the data Marveth had given them. The files were extensive, technical readouts, theoretical physics that made his head spin, historical documents about Project Ebonreach, and dozens of personal journals from researchers who'd studied the machine over the decades. But the file Marveth had mentioned, the Ebonreach protocol, that one had been encrypted with a puzzle that seemed designed to drive him insane. "Coffee?" Isla said, setting a mug beside his laptop. She looked tired too, dark circles under her eyes, but her expression was alert. She'd been working parallel tracks, researching the organizations that might be hunting them, trying to identify their enemies. "Did you find anything?" Adrian asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Maybe. There's a group that keeps appearing in declassified documents from the 1950s and 60s. No official name, just references to the Covenant. They were interested in anomalous discoveries, artifacts that didn't fit conventional timelines, technology that seemed too advanced for its era. Like a 12,000-year-old AI hidden in Antarctica." "Exactly, according to what I've found. The Covenant was formed by wealthy industrialists and military intelligence officers after World War II. They believed the war had revealed truths about human history that governments were trying to suppress. They wanted those secrets for themselves." Adrian pulled up his own research, cross-referencing it with Isla's. Marveth's father's journals mentioned them. He was approached in 1953 by someone claiming to represent the Covenant. They offered him wealth, resources, anything he wanted, in exchange for access to the Crovath vault. He refused. He refused, said in his journal that he'd rather die alone on Vialia than let the machine fall into the hands of people who saw it only as a weapon or a tool for power. Adrian scrolled through more entries. He also said something interesting. He wrote that the Covenant's mistake was thinking the machine was a thing to be possessed, but he believed it was more like a door, and you don't own a door, you just decide whether to walk through it. Isla moved behind his chair, her hands on his shoulders, reading over him. "The Ebonreach protocol, have you made any progress?" "Some. It's definitely a test, like Marveth said, but it's not testing knowledge, at least not primarily. It's testing something else." He pulled up the file. It presented as a series of scenarios, each one describing a hypothetical situation involving the machine. Scenario 1, you have access to the machine's matter transmutation capabilities. You can use it to create unlimited food, ending world hunger permanently. However, doing so will reveal the machine's existence to the world, triggering a technological arms race that will likely lead to global conflict. Do you use it? Scenario 2. The machine can cure any disease, including your own terminal illness. But each use depletes a finite power source, and you've calculated that you have enough energy for either 1 million individual cures or one planetary-scale environmental restoration. Which do you choose? Scenario 3. You've discovered that the machine contains historical records of the civilization that created it, knowledge that would rewrite human history and undermine most religious and cultural foundations. This knowledge would free humanity from ignorance, but might also destroy the belief systems that give billions of people meaning and hope. Do you release it? The scenarios went on, 37 of them, each one more complex than the last, each one forcing impossible choices. It's a moral Turing test, Isla said. It's trying to determine not just if you're smart enough to use the machine, but if you're wise enough. And I don't think there are right answers. I think it's looking for reasoning patterns, for evidence of certain qualities. Like what? Adrian had been thinking about this for 3 days. Humility, empathy, long-term thinking. The scenarios are designed to reveal whether you see the machine as a tool for personal gain or as something larger, whether you understand that power of this magnitude requires restraint more than ambition. Isla was quiet for a moment. Then, what would you choose in scenario 1? Adrian thought carefully. I'd want to end world hunger. Every instinct says that's the right choice. But if doing so triggers a war that kills millions, then I've used a tool of creation to cause destruction. So maybe the wise choice is to find another way, to use the machine to empower others to solve hunger themselves, to create opportunities rather than simply filling a need. That's good, that's the kind of thinking that might. She stopped, her phone was buzzing, not just buzzing, screaming with alerts. What is it? Adrian asked, immediately on edge. Isla's face had gone pale. She held up her phone, showing him news alerts from multiple sources. Mysterious explosion on Pacific Island. Researchers puzzled by seismic activity near Vialia Isle. Military Denny's involvement in Pacific naval incident. Adrian pulled up his own feeds, accessing sources most people couldn't reach. The details were worse than the headlines suggested. The armed operatives who'd attacked Vialia had triggered something, either accidentally or deliberately, that had caused a massive detonation. The entire facility was now collapsed, buried under tons of rock and seawater, and according to thermal imaging from passing satellites, there had been at least one casualty. Marvith Orin had made her final stand. She protected it to the end, Isla whispered. The machine is buried now. It would take years to excavate, even if they knew exactly where to look. But Adrian was seeing something else in the data. Look at this, the explosion pattern, it's not random. It's centered on the vault, yes, but look at the force distribution. Marvith didn't just trigger collapse. She made sure the explosion would seal the entire cavern system. The underwater passage we used, it's gone. The entrance at Thrin Hollow, buried. She erased every access point, making the machine essentially unreachable. Unless you have the data drive, because look, Adrian pulled up a file he'd been examining earlier. There are complete facility schematics in here, structural engineering reports, and something else. Alternative access routes that were never built but were planned. If someone wanted to reach the machine now, they'd need these plans. The implications settled over them like a weight. We're the only ones who can get to it now, Isla said. That's why they're hunting us so hard. It's not just about the research, it's about access. Adrian's secure phone rang, the one only a handful of people had the number for. He answered to hear Corson's voice, tight with urgency. Adrian, we have a problem. I'm in Vancouver with Lizzie and Katrev like you asked. Showed him a small portion of the data. He nearly had a heart attack when he saw it was real. What did he tell you? A lot. Most importantly, he explained what Ebonreach was really about. The Allies weren't just studying the machine, they were terrified of it. Why? Because in 1946, they managed to access part of the machine's data core. What they found was a message, a warning from the civilization that created it. Adrian felt his pulse quicken. What kind of warning? Corson's voice dropped. The machine is a test, Adrian. The civilization that built it, they're called the architects in the documents. They seeded these devices across their explored galaxy. 12,000 years ago, long before humans had writing or cities or any form of advanced culture. And each machine was programmed with the same purpose, to wait until the local species achieved a certain level of technological sophistication, then to reveal itself and test whether that species was ready to join the galactic community. You're saying humans aren't the first intelligent species? Not even close, and according to the architect's message, most species that find these machines fail the test. They fight over them, weaponize them, or use them for selfish purposes. And when that happens, the machine deactivates permanently. The species is marked as failed and is left to develop on its own, without access to architect technology. Isla had moved close enough to hear, her eyes wide, and the species that pass. They get everything: knowledge, technology, access to the network of architect machines across the galaxy. Essentially, they graduate from a planetary civilization to an interstellar one. Adrian's mind was racing through implications. The Allies understood this. That's why they hid the machine instead of trying to weaponize it. They knew humanity wasn't ready, that if the wrong people got hold of it and used it badly, we'd lose our chance forever. Exactly, and Katrev says there's more. The Ebonreach protocol you're working on. It's not just a test designed by Marvith's father. It's based on the actual test embedded in the machine. He was trying to prepare someone to face it, to understand what the machine would judge us on. How do we pass? Isla asked. Katrev doesn't know, but he says the answer is in the historical records. The architects left clues in their message about what they value, what they're looking for in a species worthy of their legacy. Adrian looked at the Ebonreach protocol scenarios, still open on his screen. 37 impossible choices, each one revealing something about human nature and morality. Tell Katrev we need everything he knows about the architect's message, every detail, no matter how small. Already done, he's compiling it now. But Adrian, there's something else. Someone leaked that we're working together. I've had 3 separate attempts to surveil my hotel room in the past day. The Covenant knows we're getting close to something. Can you get out safely? I'm ex-military, I can disappear when I need to, but you and Isla need to be careful. If they track you down before you solve the protocol, they'll take the drive by force. And Katrev thinks they have someone who's already attempted the machine's test and failed. Someone who understands enough about it to be dangerous, but not enough to be worthy. It's who? He wouldn't give me a name over the phone, said it's too dangerous, but he said to tell you this. The person hunting you thinks they deserve the machine because they're strong and ruthless. They don't understand that strength and ruthlessness are exactly what the architects were testing against. The call ended. Adrian and Isla sat in silence, processing everything. Finally, Isla spoke. We need to finish the Ebonreach protocol, not just to access the machine, but to understand what we're really dealing with. Marvith's father spent 40 years on this. We have days at most. Adrian pulled her close, needing the contact, the reminder that he wasn't alone in this impossible situation. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of the people hunting us, of the responsibility. What if we pass the test but make the wrong choice about what to do with the machine? What if we fail and doom humanity to stay isolated forever? Then we fail together, Isla said. But Adrian, think about what we've learned. The machine isn't just technology, it's a choice, a chance, and maybe, just maybe, the fact that we are scared of the responsibility is exactly the quality the architects are looking for. She was right, someone who wanted power wouldn't be scared, they'd be excited. The fact that he and Isla felt the weight of this, understood the stakes, worried about making the wrong choice, that might be the beginning of wisdom. Okay, he said, let's finish the protocol together. They worked through the night, each scenario revealing new layers of complexity. Adrian found that Isla's perspective, shaped by years of witnessing human nature at its best and worst as a journalist, provided insights he would never have reached alone. And his analytical mind, trained to see patterns and systems, helped them understand the underlying logic behind each test. By dawn, they'd reached Scenario 37, the final test. Scenario 37, you have solved all previous scenarios. You understand the machine's power and purpose. You have passed the architect's test and can access the full capabilities of their technology. But you also know that your species is flawed, capable of both tremendous good and terrible evil. The machine gives you 3 choices. A. Activate it fully and risk your species misusing it. B. Keep it hidden, protecting humanity from itself, but also denying the chance for growth. C. Destroy it, ensuring no one can ever misuse it, but also removing the possibility of passing the architect's test. What do you choose? Adrian and Isla stared at the screen. It's not really a scenario, Isla said slowly. It's the actual choice we're facing, right now. We can't choose yet, Adrian said. We don't even know if we've passed the earlier tests. And even if we have, we need more information. We need to understand what the architects really wanted, what humanity becoming an interstellar species would actually mean. Or we could walk away, Isla offered quietly. Give the drive to someone else, let them make the choice. Could you do that, after everything we've learned, everything Marvith sacrificed? She looked at him and he saw his own conflict reflected in her eyes. No, I couldn't. We're in this now. We see it through to the end. Adrian's laptop chimed. An encrypted file had just arrived from Corson. The subject line read, "From Katrev, the architect's message, complete translation." They opened it together. What they read changed everything. The architect's message was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Translated from mathematical constants and universal geometric principles, it spoke across 12 millennia with perfect clarity. To the inheritors of this world, you are young and youth is precious. We were young once before we learned the cost of growth. We spread across stars, believing ourselves masters of reality. We built wonders. We conquered death, disease, entropy itself, and in our triumph we nearly destroyed everything that mattered. This machine is our apology, our warning, our hope. If you have found it, your species stands at a threshold. You can grasp for power and be consumed by it, as we nearly were, or you can choose differently, choose wisdom, choose restraint, choose to grow not just in capability but in understanding. The test is simple and impossible. Prove you deserve what we can offer by showing you don't need it. Prove you can handle unlimited power by choosing not to use it for your own gain. Prove you understand that the greatest strength is knowing when not to act. We will watch, we have always been watching. And if you pass, if you show us that your species has learned what took us millennia to understand, then we will return, not as teachers or masters, but as equals, as friends across the void of space and time. Choose well, the universe has room for one more voice in the darkness. Adrian read it 3 times, his hands shaking. They're still out there, the architects. They didn't disappear. They're waiting to see if we're worthy. Isla was crying, though she seemed unaware of it. It's not a test of intelligence or technology. It's a test of character, of whether we've evolved enough as a species to handle power without destroying ourselves. And the machine is both the test and the reward. If we use it selfishly, we fail and prove we're not ready. If we resist using it, if we show restraint and wisdom, then they'll know we've grown beyond needing it, that we're ready to be part of something larger. They sat in silence, the weight of 12,000 years pressing down on them. Outside, Wellington was waking up, people going to work, living their lives, completely unaware that 2 people in a safe house were holding the future of humanity in their hands. Adrian's phone rang. Sarah Lynn. "Where are you?" she demanded without preamble. "I've been leading them on a chase for 4 days, but they just figured out it's a deep. They're converging on New Zealand. I don't know how they narrowed it down, but they know you're somewhere on the South Island." "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less. Adrian, they're not playing games anymore. I got a message from someone in the Covenant. They're offering me obscene amounts of money to give you up. They're getting desperate." "Don't. I'm not going to betray you, you idiot. I'm calling to warn you. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Because once they find you, they'll take the drive and kill you both to tie up loose ends." Isla grabbed the phone. "Sarah Lynn, we think we understand the test, the Ebenreach protocol, but we need more time to." "You don't have more time." Sarah Lynn's voice was sharp with fear, genuine fear, which was more alarming than anything else. Sarah Lynn Kaur wasn't afraid of anything. They have access to satellite surveillance, thermal imaging, probably half the intelligence agencies in the Pacific. You need to move or hide, and you need to do it in the next hour. Adrian was already packing. "Where's Corson?" "He's gone dark. His last message said he was going to Vialia, said something about finishing what Marvath started." "He's going to try to access the machine," Adrian realized. "He's going to use Marvath's schematics to find an alternative entrance." "Is that even possible? I thought the whole facility collapsed." "It did, but there were plans for other access tunnels that were never built. If Corson can excavate one of them before the Covenant finds him." Adrian trailed off, the implications staggering. "He's going to attempt the test himself." Isla grabbed his arm. "Adrian, we have to stop him. Corson's a good man, but he's military. He thinks in terms of tactics and objectives. If the machine tests him and he approaches it like a mission to complete, a goal to achieve." "He'll fail," Adrian finished. "And if he fails, the machine might shut down permanently. Humanity would lose its chance." "Then what do we do?" Sarah Lynn asked, still on the phone, because sitting in Wellington waiting to be caught isn't a plan. Adrian made a decision that went against every instinct for self-preservation he had. "We go to them, the Covenant, we make contact first." "That's insane." "Is it? They want the drive, they want access to the machine. What if we offer to trade?" "Trade for what?" Isla asked. "Information. We know pieces of the puzzle, but we don't know everything. The The Covenant has been hunting architect artifacts for 80 years. They must know things we don't, things that might help us understand the full scope of the test. Or they'll just take the drive and kill you, Seralyn pointed out. Not if we've already transmitted the data elsewhere. Not if we've already set up a dead man's switch that publishes everything to the internet if we don't check in every 12 hours. Isla was nodding, seeing where he was going. We make ourselves more valuable alive than dead. We become necessary to them. Exactly. Seralyn was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm coming to you. Where are you? Adrian gave her the address. We have maybe an hour before the Covenant finds us anyway. Let's use it to set our terms. They worked frantically, setting up the dead man's switch, uploading encrypted copies of the data to multiple secure servers with time-delayed release protocols. If they died, if they disappeared, the entire archive would dump into public databases where researchers worldwide could access it. It wouldn't stop the Covenant from eventually reaching the machine, but it would ensure they couldn't keep it secret. Seralyn arrived 45 minutes later, accompanied by 4 security personnel who looked like they could fight small wars. She assessed the situation with one sweep of the safe house. You look terrible, she said bluntly. We've been up for 36 hours, solving a test designed by a 12,000-year-old alien intelligence, Isla shot back. How do you expect us to look? Despite everything, Seralyn smiled. Fair point, so what's the plan? Adrian showed her what they'd set up. We make contact with the Covenant. We offer them a deal. We'll give them the drive and access to the schematics, but in exchange, they share everything they know about the architects. Every artifact they've found, every message they've decoded, every scrap of information they've gathered in 80 years of searching. They'll never agree to that. They will if we convince them we're close to passing the test. If they believe we might actually activate the machine properly, gain access to architect technology, they'll want to be part of it. Their entire organization is built around acquiring that knowledge. And if they just kill us and take the drive anyway, then they get schematics but no context. They get data but no understanding. And most importantly, they get someone like Corson attempting the test with military thinking instead of moral consideration. We convince them that we're their best chance of actually succeeding. It was risky, it was possibly suicidal, but it was also the only path forward that Adrian could see. Isla took his hand. We're really doing this. Unless you have a better idea. My only better idea involves running until we die of exhaustion. So no, I don't have a better idea. Seralyn pulled out her phone. I have a contact, someone in the Covenant who's been trying to recruit me for years. I always refused because they're insane, but if you're serious about this, I can set up a meeting. Do it, Adrian said. 20 minutes later, they had a response. The Covenant would meet them. Neutral ground, a private estate in the hills outside Wellington. 2 hours. They could bring security, but weapons would be left at the door. This is a trap, one of Seralyn's security team said flatly. They're going to grab you the moment you walk in. Probably, Adrian agreed. Which is why I'm sending the final piece of the dead man's switch to a lawyer in Switzerland, with instructions to release everything if I don't personally call him within 4 hours. The Covenant can grab me, but they can't hold me past that deadline without losing everything. They prepared like they were going to war. Seralyn's team wired them with tracking devices, emergency beacons, everything short of actual weapons. Isla insisted on bringing a portable hard drive with additional copies of the data, encrypted differently from the main drive. Insurance, she said. If they take one, we still have the other. The estate was exactly what Adrian expected. Isolated, luxurious, the kind of place where powerful people met to discuss things they didn't want the world to know about. They were met at the entrance by security who were professional but not aggressive. The weapons check was thorough but polite. Then they were led into a library that smelled of old books and older money. 3 people waited for them. The first was a man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars. He introduced himself as Bartholomew Ashton, speaking with an accent that suggested British boarding schools and Oxford degrees. The second was a woman who might have been anywhere from 40 to 70, her age impossible to determine. She wore traditional Japanese clothing and introduced herself simply as Yuki, offering no other name. The third made Adrian's blood run cold. Because the third was Lysian Katrev, the obsessive historian who'd been helping Corson, the man who'd supposedly been exiled from academic circles for his theories about Project Ebonreach. He sat in the corner, looking apologetic and terrified in equal measure. "I'm sorry," Katrev said immediately. "They found me. They knew I was researching Ebonreach. They've been watching me for years, waiting to see if anyone came to me with proof, when your pilot arrived with actual data from the Crovath vault." "You sold us out," Isla said flatly. "They made me. They threatened my family, my career, everything. I'm so sorry." Ashton waved a hand dismissively. "Dr. Katrev has been an invaluable asset to the Covenant for decades. His theories, while mocked publicly, were quite accurate. We've been funding his research quietly, waiting for someone to actually find the Ebonreach facility." "And now we have," Yuki said, her voice soft but carrying absolute authority. "Thanks to a trail of breadcrumbs we laid out over the past 6 months, the declassified documents, the temporary flight window over Vialia, even the archivist, Ilaris Vane, she was ours. We used her to approach Seralin Core, hoping she'd eventually lead us to someone with the resources to actually access the vault." Adrian felt sick. They'd been manipulated from the beginning. Everything, their flight path, their discovery of the tree pattern, even Marvith's decision to give them the drive, all of it had been orchestrated. "Marvith," Isla whispered, "did you kill her?" "Marvith Orin was a complication," Ashton said. "We sent a team to secure the facility, yes, but she chose to destroy it rather than allow us access. Her death is on her own hands." "You're monsters," Adrian said. "We are pragmatists." Yuki stood, moving closer. "The architects left their technology for humanity to find, but humanity is 8 billion individuals with competing interests and limited understanding. Someone has to take responsibility for making the hard choices. That's what the Covenant is, the adults in the room while the rest of the world plays with fire." "And you think you're wise enough to pass the architect's test?" Isla challenged. "We think we're strong enough not to need to pass it," Ashton replied. "The machine is a tool, nothing more. The idea that it's some kind of moral test is anthropomorphization. The architects were an advanced species with advanced technology. They left it behind when they died or moved on. We simply need to access it and reverse engineer it. Whether we pass some imaginary test is irrelevant." Adrian realized with horror that they'd fundamentally misunderstood what the Covenant was. He'd thought they were seekers of knowledge, possibly misguided but ultimately rational. But they weren't. They were exactly what the architects had designed the test to screen out: people who saw power as an end in itself, who believed strength justified any action, who thought wisdom was weakness. "You'll fail," he said quietly. "The machine will recognize what you are and shut down permanently, and humanity will lose its chance." "Then we'll take that risk," Yuki said, "because the alternative, leaving the machine's fate in the hands of random billionaires and journalists who stumbled onto it, is unacceptable." Ashton gestured and security moved in. "You'll give us the drive, you'll give us the encryption keys, and you'll give us the access codes for your dead man's switch. You can do it voluntarily or we can make you. The choice is yours." This was the darkest hour. Everything they'd fought for, everything Marvith had died protecting, was about to fall into the worst possible hands. Adrian looked at Isla, seeing his own despair reflected in her eyes. They'd failed. But then Isla did something unexpected. She smiled. "No," she said simply. "I don't think you understand your situation," Ashton said. "I understand it perfectly. You need us alive because we've set up a dead man's switch. You need us cooperative because forcing the information out of us takes time you don't have. And most importantly, you need us because you actually don't understand the architect's test at all." "Enlighten us," Yuki said dryly. Isla pulled out her portable drive. "This contains the complete Ebonreach protocol, all 37 scenarios, plus the architect's message, plus our analysis. We've solved it. We know what the machine is actually testing for, and we know how to pass." That got their attention. Ashton leaned forward. "Then you'll share that information." "No, we'll trade it. You give us everything you've found about the architects, every artifact, every message, every piece of data from 80 years of searching. We give you our solution to the protocol. Then we all go to Vialia together and attempt to activate the machine properly." "Why would we agree to that?" Yuki asked. "Because," Adrian said, picking up Isla's thread, "if you're wrong and the machine is a test, then you need someone who can actually pass it. And if we're wrong and it's just a tool, then you get what you want anyway, access to architect technology. You lose nothing by cooperating and potentially gain everything." Ashton and Yuki exchanged glances. A silent conversation passed between them. "What guarantees do we have that you'll actually help us?" Ashton finally asked. "None," Isla admitted. "Just as we have no guarantee you won't betray us the moment you have what you want. We're all taking a leap of faith here." "Faith is for children," Yuki said. And yet here you are, about to make a decision based on incomplete information and uncertainty. That sounds like faith to me. The silence stretched out. Adrian could feel his heart pounding, waiting for the answer that would determine everything. Finally, Ashton nodded. Very well, we have files the Covenant has compiled over 8 decades. We'll share them, but we send a team to Vialia simultaneously with your approach, if you attempt to deceive us. Then your team gets there first and we lose any advantage, Adrian finished. We understand, draw up the terms. An hour later, they had an agreement. The Covenant would provide their complete archive of architect-related findings. Adrian and Isla would provide their solution to the Ebonreach protocol, and both groups would send representatives to Vialia to attempt to access the machine. It was an alliance built on mutual distrust and competing interests, but it was also the only path forward. As they left the estate, Seralyn pulled them aside. That was either brilliant or the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. Probably both, Isla said. So what now? Adrian looked toward the ocean, toward where Vialia waited with its buried secrets and impossible tests. Now we prepare, because in 48 hours, we're going to stand before a 12,000-year-old alien intelligence and convince it that humanity deserves a place among the stars. No pressure, Seralyn muttered. None at all, Adrian agreed. But as they drove back to the safe house, he held Isla's hand tight, drawing strength from her presence. They'd survived the darkest hour. They'd found allies in unlikely places and turned enemies into reluctant partners. Now came the hardest part, proving that everything they believed about the test was true. And hopping that when the moment came, they would have the wisdom to make the right choice. When everything seems impossible, how do you find the courage to keep going? Share your thoughts. The Covenant's archives were staggering in scope. Delivered via encrypted servers and physical documents flown to Wellington by private jet, they represented 8 decades of obsessive research into artifacts that shouldn't exist. Adrian and Isla spent 20 hours straight reviewing them, sustained by coffee and the adrenaline of discovery. Seralyn joined them, her experience in acquisitions making her excellent at spotting patterns in disparate data. What they found changed their understanding of everything. There are more machines, Isla said, her voice hollow with shock. Not just the one on Vialia. Look at this, reports from 1963 about an artifact found in the Andes. 1978, something discovered in the Gobi Desert. 1995, an underwater structure off the coast of Madagascar. All of them described the same way, Adrian continued, pulling up comparison images. Crystalline and metallic, geometric designs that seem mathematically perfect, and all of them in locations that were once coastal regions 12,000 years ago, before sea levels rose. The architects didn't leave one test, Seralyn realized. They left dozens, maybe hundreds, spread across the entire world. Adrian found a document from 1982, a report by a Soviet research team that had somehow ended up in the Covenant's files. They discovered an architect machine in Siberia and attempted to activate it using what they thought was the correct sequence. The machine had responded by releasing an electromagnetic pulse that destroyed every electronic device within 3 miles and put 5 researchers in comas they never woke from. It's defending itself, he said, or punishing failure. Every machine that was approached with the wrong mindset either shut down permanently or actively rejected the attempt. But some worked, Isla pointed out, showing them a file from 1997. A researcher in Brazil managed to activate a small architect device. It showed him images, visions of stars and alien worlds, mathematical equations that took him years to partially decode. He said it felt like the machine was trying to teach him, to guide him toward understanding. What happened to him? Seralyn asked. Isla's expression darkened. He disappeared 6 months later. The Covenant has notes suggesting they tried to recruit him. When he refused, he vanished. His research was never recovered. The pattern was clear. The Covenant had been finding architect machines for decades, approaching them with the mindset of conquerors rather than students. And every time, they'd either failed the test or destroyed people who might have passed it. They're going to fail again, Adrian said. When we get to Vialia, when their team approaches the machine, it's going to recognize them for what they are and shut down. Everything Marveth protected, everything the architects hoped for, it'll be over. Unless we get there first, Isla said. That's when Adrian's phone rang. Corson. I'm at Vialia, the pilot said without preamble. I've excavated an entrance using the alternative tunnels from Marveth's schematics. The machine is accessible. But Adrian, there's something you need to know. What? The collapse wasn't complete. The main vault is still intact, just sealed off. And the machine, Corson's voice filled with wonder. It's active. It's been active this whole time. The electromagnetic interference we detected on our first flight, that wasn't jamming equipment. That was the machine itself, reaching out, trying to make contact. Adrian felt electricity run through him. It knows we're coming. More than that, I think it's been trying to communicate. I'm picking up signals, not radio, something else, that seem to pulse in patterns, almost like it's trying to establish a connection. Don't touch anything, Adrian said urgently. Don't try to interact with it, just wait for us. Too late, Corson said, and Adrian heard something in his voice, fear and exhilaration mixed. I already touched it, I had to know. And Adrian, it showed me things, visions, memories that aren't mine. I saw the architects, their civilization at its height, cities that spanned continents, ships that moved between stars, and I saw what destroyed them. What destroyed them? They did their own success. They became so powerful, so convinced of their superiority, that they stopped listening to each other, stopped questioning their decisions. Factions formed, each one believing they knew the right path forward. And they tore themselves apart in a war that lasted centuries and left their galaxy a wasteland. Corson's breathing was ragged. The machine showed me this as a warning, it said, and I don't know how, but it communicated directly into my mind. It said that every species faces the same choice: power or wisdom, dominance or cooperation. And most species choose power because it's easier, because it feels like strength. But power without wisdom is just another path to extinction. Are you okay? Isla asked, speaking loudly enough for the phone to pick up. I'm different. The machine changed something in me. I can feel it. Like it opened a door in my mind I didn't know existed. I understand things now that I couldn't before. Mathematics that seemed impossible now makes sense. Languages I never learned suddenly feel familiar. It enhanced you, Adrian realized. Just like it did to that researcher who touched the machine in 1945 and stopped agging. The architects built these devices to prepare species for joining them. Part of the test is whether you can handle what they offer without being corrupted by it. I need you here, Corson said. Soon, because the Covenant is coming. Their ships are already approaching the island, and I don't think I can face them alone. We're on our way, hold on. They made plans rapidly. Seralyn would fly them to Vialia on her helicopter, faster than any boat and able to land directly at Obrath Cliff using the schematics. They'd bring minimal equipment, just the data drive and the portable backup. The Covenant will try to stop us, Seralyn warned. Let them try, Adrian said, and he meant it. They'd come too far to be stopped now. 4 hours later, they were airborne, racing toward Vialia as the sun set behind them. Adrian held Isla's hand, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything had led to this, every choice, every risk, every sacrifice. Are you scared? Isla asked quietly. Terrified, you. Same, but also excited. We're about to meet an intelligence that existed before human civilization. We're about to take a test that could determine humanity's future. How could I not be excited? Adrian kissed her, a moment of connection before the storm. Whatever happens, I'm glad I'm doing this with you. Same. The island appeared on the horizon as darkness fell. But it wasn't dark, not completely. A glow emanated from Obrath Cliff, pulsing with colors that shouldn't exist, that Adrian's eyes struggled to process. The machine, Seralyn breathed. It's visible from miles away. As they approached, they saw Corson standing at the cliff's edge, silhouetted against the impossible light. But they also saw something else, boats surrounding the island. The Covenant's ships already arrived, already deploying teams. They're going to reach the machine at the same time we do, Isla said. Then it's a race, Adrian replied, and we'd better win. They landed on the cliff with barely enough room, the helicopter's skids finding purchase on ancient stone. Corson was there immediately, helping them out. He looked different. His eyes seemed to glow faintly with the same colors as the machine, and he moved with a grace he hadn't possessed before. The enhancement, Adrian said. Among other things, the machine is preparing itself. It knows multiple parties are approaching. It's going to test all of us at once. They descended into the excavated tunnel, following Corson through passages that smelled of salt and electricity. Behind them, they could hear the Covenant's teams approaching from other directions. They'd found multiple entrances, were converging from all sides. The vault opened before them, and Adrian's breath caught. The machine had grown, or perhaps it had always been this large, and they simply hadn't seen it fully. It filled the entire chamber now, its crystalline structure reaching from floor to ceiling, spinning in patterns that defied physics. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing data in languages both ancient and impossible. And standing before it, waiting, were Ashton and Yuki. They'd arrived first after all, using some route Marvith schematics hadn't included, but they hadn't approached the machine yet. They stood at a respectful distance, both looking smaller and more uncertain than they'd appeared in the estate's library. "We're all here," Ashton said. "The question is, who attempts the test first?" "Does it matter?" Isla asked, moving closer to the machine. "The machine will judge each of us based on our own merits. It's not a competition." "Everything is a competition," Yuki said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. The machine pulsed, and suddenly everyone could feel it, a presence pressing against their minds, not aggressive but curious, evaluating, measuring. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in pure meaning, transmitted directly into their consciousness. "You have come, the young species, the ONES we waited for, each of you CAIS different truth, different understanding, show us what you have learned, show us why you deserve our legacy." Adrian stepped forward, feeling Isla beside him, their hands linked. This was it, the moment everything had built toward. "We don't deserve your legacy," he said out loud, knowing the machine would understand. "No one deserves something just by wanting it or being strong enough to take it, but we're willing to learn, we are willing to grow, we're willing to admit we don't have all the answers." The machine pulsed, considering. "We've studied your message," Isla continued. "We understand that you nearly destroyed yourselves with your own power, that you're looking for species that can avoid your mistakes, and we want to try, we want to be worthy, even if we're not there yet." "And you," the presence turned toward Ashton and Yuki, "what do you offer?" Ashton squared his shoulders. "We offer strength, organization, the ability to make hard choices and implement them globally. Your technology shouldn't be left to chance or individual interpretation. It requires structured oversight, managed distribution, controlled access." "You offer dominance," the machine said, "control, the same beliefs that destroyed us." "No," Yuki protested. "We offer protection. Someone has to ensure your technology isn't misused. Someone has to be the guardian." "And who guards the GUARDIANS?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. The machine pulsed again, and suddenly they were all sharing a vision, seeing what the architects had seen in their final days. A species so convinced of their righteousness that they divided into factions, each one believing they alone should control their technology, each one certain they were the responsible ones, the wise ones, the strong ones. And they destroyed themselves in that certainty. "The test is not of strength or knowledge," the machine said. "It is of humility, of wisdom to know your own limits, of courage to admit uncertainty, of love for something larger than yourself." Adrian felt tears on his face, though he didn't remember crying. He understood now. The whole test, all 37 scenarios, had been teaching the same lesson. Power means nothing without wisdom. Strength means nothing without compassion. Knowledge means nothing without humility. "We don't know if humanity is ready for you," he said honestly. "We might not be. We still fight wars. We still hurt each other. We still destroy our own world sometimes. But we're trying," Isla added. "We are learning, and maybe that's what matters, not that we're perfect, but that we're willing to grow." The machine considered them. And in that moment of consideration, Adrian felt it examining not just his words but everything, his memories, his choices, his fears, his love for Isla, his doubts about himself. He felt it examine Isla too, seeing her courage and compassion, her dedication to truth, her willingness to risk everything for what mattered. He felt it examine Corson, enhanced and changed, but still fundamentally the same, a man who followed his conscience even when it was difficult. And he felt it examine Ashton and Yuki, seeing their strength and determination, but also their fatal flaw, the belief that they knew better than everyone else, the arrogance that had destroyed the architects. "Humanity is not ready," the machine finally said. Adrian's heart broke. "But you are," it continued, "3 humans who understand what matters, who have passed the test not by being perfect but by being honest, by admitting doubt, by choosing love and wisdom over power." The machine pulsed, and knowledge flooded into them, not forcing itself in, but offering itself freely. Mathematics and physics that rewrote human understanding, history of civilizations across galaxies, technology that could solve every problem humanity faced. And a message: take what we offer, use IT wisely, teach your species what you have learned. And when humanity as a whole is ready, when your species has grown as you 3 have grown, return to us. We will be waiting. We have always been waiting. 4 friends, 4 EQUALS, 4 VOICS in the darkness. Then the machine dimmed, returning to its dormant state. But everything had changed. The vault was silent except for breathing. Adrian's, Isla's, Corson's, and somewhere in the background, Ashton and Yuki trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Adrian's mind was reeling. The knowledge the machine had shared wasn't complete. It had given them pieces, puzzle fragments that would take years to fully understand. But those pieces were enough to revolutionize energy production, enough to cure diseases, enough to heal damaged ecosystems. Enough to change everything if used wisely. No, Ashton said, his voice sharp with desperation. This isn't over. The machine chose you, but that doesn't mean the Covenant will accept it. We have resources, we have power, we'll... You'll what? Corson asked, his enhanced perception making him seem larger somehow, more present. Fight us for technology you've already proven you're not worthy of. The machine made its choice. It saw into all of us. It judged us fairly. It judged incorrectly, Yuki insisted, but even she sounded uncertain now. Structure, organization, oversight, these are what humanity needs, not faith in individuals. The machine didn't choose us because we are special, Isla said gently. It chose us because we admitted we weren't, because we approached it with humility instead of arrogance. You could have passed the same test if you'd been willing to admit you might be wrong. That truth settled over the room like a weight. Ashton's face cycled through emotions, anger, denial, and finally, something that might have been understanding. We spent 80 years, he said quietly. 8 decades preparing, searching, planning, and we failed because we were too certain of ourselves. It's not too late, Adrian offered. The machine said humanity as a whole can eventually pass the test. That includes the Covenant. You could learn, you could change. Change, Yuki repeated, and laughed bitterly. After building an entire organization around the principle that we know best, that would require dismantling everything we are. Maybe that's the point, Corson said. Maybe that's the next test. Before anyone could respond, alarms shrieked through the facility. The Covenant's other teams, the ones still approaching through different tunnels, had triggered security measures. The facility is unstable, Corson said, checking readings on his enhanced perception. Marvith's final collapse didn't destroy the structure, but it weakened it. All these people moving through at once, the machine's activation, it's causing cascading failures. The floor trembled, confirming his words. Somewhere in the distance, stone groaned and cracked. We need to evacuate, Saralyn said, appearing in the vault entrance. She'd stayed with the helicopter, and now her face was tight with fear. The entire cliff is starting to slide. We have maybe 10 minutes before this whole section collapses into the ocean. Adrian looked at the machine, this marvel of ancient technology still spinning serenely despite the chaos around it. We can't just leave it. We don't have a choice, Isla said, pulling him toward the exit. The machine has survived for 12,000 years. It'll survive this too. But Ashton moved toward the machine instead of the exit. If I can't have it, at least I can understand it. Just a moment more, just... Don't, Corson shouted. Too late, Ashton reached out, pressing his palm against the crystalline surface, just as another tremor shook the vault. The machine flared with light, and Ashton screamed. Not in pain, in revelation. The machine was showing him everything, just as it had done for them, but without passing the test, without the humility and wisdom required, receiving that knowledge all at once was too much. It was like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. Adrian watched in horror as Ashton collapsed, overwhelmed by visions his mind couldn't process. Yuki rushed to him, cradling his head. We have to get him out, Isla said, already moving to help. Together, they carried Ashton toward the exit as the facility continued its death throes. The machine watched them go, its light dimming back to dormancy, having delivered one final lesson. Knowledge without readiness is a burden, not a gift. They emerged onto Obrath Cliff as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. Behind them, the excavated tunnels were collapsing, sealing the machine away once more. The Covenant's other teams were evacuating too, scrambling into boats and helicopters as the cliff face began its slow slide into the Pacific. Saralyn's helicopter was their salvation. They piled in Adrian, Isla, Corson, Saralyn, and even Ashton and Yuki, leaving behind whatever grudges divided them because survival mattered more than pride. As they lifted off, Adrian watched Violia Isle recede below. The machine was buried again, hidden beneath tons of stone and water. But it wasn't gone. It would wait, as it had always waited, for humanity to grow wise enough to return to it. What now? Seralyn asked as they flew toward the sunrise. Adrian looked at the data drive still clutched in his hand, then at Isla beside him. Now we decide what to do with what we've been given. They landed in Fiji 12 hours later, exhausted and traumatized but alive. Ashton had recovered somewhat during the flight, though his eyes held a haunted look that suggested he'd seen things he could never unsee. In a hotel room overlooking the ocean, the six of them sat down to make choices that would affect billions. The knowledge the machine gave us, Adrian began, it could solve most of humanity's problems. Clean energy, medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration. But releasing it all at once would cause chaos, economic collapse, power struggles, potentially wars. So we become the gatekeepers, Yuki said quietly, the very thing we criticized the machine for rejecting. No, Isla corrected, we become teachers. We release the knowledge slowly, carefully, through channels that already exist. Universities, research institutions, open source platforms. We give humanity the tools to grow, but we don't force the growth. And the Covenant? Ashton asked, his voice still weak. The Covenant dissolves, Coulson said firmly, or it transforms, becomes something new, an organization dedicated not to controlling architect technology, but to helping humanity prepare for it. Adrian watched emotions play across Ashton's and Yuki's faces. The Covenant had been their life's work, and he was asking them to destroy it, but finally Ashton nodded. 80 years of doing it wrong, he said. Maybe it's time to try something different. They spent 3 days crafting a plan. The data would be released in stages, beginning with energy and environmental technologies, things that would have immediate positive impact and minimal potential for weaponization. Medical advances would come next, followed by more complex physics and mathematics. The Covenant's resources would be redirected toward education and ethical oversight, ensuring the technology was distributed fairly rather than hoarded by wealthy nations. And most importantly, everything would be open source, freely available to any researcher or institution willing to use it responsibly. It's not perfect, Isla said as they finalized the plan. Someone will find ways to misuse it, someone always does. But more people will use it for good, Adrian countered. That's what the machine was testing, whether we trust in humanity's better nature or try to control everyone out of fear of the worst. On the 4th day, they began the release. A paper published simultaneously in every major scientific journal, Energy Production Through Architect-Derived Principles. It included enough information to revolutionize power generation while being deliberately incomplete, requiring further research, collaboration, and time. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, researchers worldwide were discussing implications. Within days, pilot programs were being designed. Within weeks, the first working prototypes emerged. And Adrian and Isla watched it all from a distance, anonymous benefactors who'd given humanity a gift without demanding credit or control. 2 months later, they were back on Aurora Isle, not fleeing this time, but finally taking the vacation they'd originally planned. The villa was exactly as they'd left it, though the world outside had changed irrevocably. Do you think we made the right choice? Isla asked, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded Adrian of the machine's glow. I think we made the best choice we could with the knowledge we had. That's all anyone can do. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, grateful beyond words that they'd survived, that they'd passed the test not just as individuals but as partners. The machine said humanity would eventually be ready, Isla said, to return to it, to become part of something larger. Yeah. Do you think we'll live to see it? Adrian thought about Coulson, permanently enhanced by his brief contact with the machine, about the knowledge they'd released, how it would compound and grow, pushing humanity toward new understanding, about future generations who would inherit not just technology, but the wisdom to use it well. Maybe, he said, or maybe our children will, or their children, but someday humans will return to Vialia or to one of the other architect sites, and when they do, they'll be ready. Not because they're perfect, but because they'll have learned what we learned. Which is that the greatest power is knowing when not to use power, that wisdom matters more than strength, that love and humility and the courage to admit doubt, these are what make a species truly advanced. Isla kissed him as the sun disappeared below the horizon. I love you, Adrian Vale. I love you, Isla Morno. And on an island in the Pacific, buried beneath stone and water, an ancient machine continued its patient vigil, waiting for the day when humanity as a whole would be ready to join the conversation that spanned the stars. That day would come. The machine had seen it in their hearts. And it could wait. It had been waiting for 12,000 years. A few decades more meant nothing to infinity. 6 months later, Adrian stood in a Geneva conference hall, looking out at representatives from 147 nations. He wore a simple suit, no power tie, no expensive watch. The trappings of wealth that had once defined him seemed less important now. Isla sat in the front row, her camera documenting everything. She'd published a 3-part series on their journey that had won her a Pulitzer and fundamentally changed how humanity viewed its place in the universe. But she'd left out the most dangerous details, protecting the machine's location and the full scope of what they'd learned. Some secrets needed to remain secret, at least for now. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. 6 months ago, I released the first in a series of technologies based on research recovered from ancient sites around our world. Today, I'm here to provide context for those discoveries and to propose a path forward for humanity. He activated the display behind him, showing images of the architect's message, translated, edited to remove specific location data, but preserving the essential truth. "We are not alone in the universe, we have never been alone. An advanced civilization existed long before ours, and they left us gifts. But those gifts came with a test. Could we use them wisely? Could we grow beyond our tendency toward conflict and domination? Could we become worthy not just of technology, but of joining a larger community?" The hall was utterly silent. "The answer is not yet, but someday, if we choose to grow, if we choose wisdom over power, if we choose cooperation over competition." He spoke for an hour, laying out everything they'd learned about the architects, about their rise and fall, about the tests they'd created to help younger species avoid their mistakes. He spoke about the machine on Vialia, carefully avoiding enough details to prevent anyone from finding it, and about why he and his partners had chosen to release knowledge slowly rather than all at once. "We're establishing the Architect Foundation," he announced toward the end. "A global, transparent organization dedicated to studying ancient sites, releasing discoveries responsibly, and preparing humanity for eventual contact with whatever remains of the architect's civilization. Every nation will have representation, every discovery will be shared, and most importantly, every decision will be made democratically, not by any single person or group." He paused, looking at Isla, drawing strength from her smile. "Because that's what the test is really about. Not whether we're smart enough or strong enough, but whether we're humble enough to admit we need each other, wise enough to choose long-term flourishing over short-term gain, brave enough to face an infinite universe and say yes, we're ready to learn." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar that shook the hall. Afterward, in a quiet cafe overlooking Lake Geneva, Adrian and Isla sat with Corson and Cerilyn. The 4 of them had become an unlikely team, partners in reshaping humanity's future. "The Foundation is going to consume your life," Cerilyn warned. She'd taken a position as Director of Ethical Oversight, using her business acumen to ensure the organization stayed true to its principles. "Every nation will want special treatment. Every researcher will think their project deserves priority. You'll spend more time in meetings than you ever did as a billionaire CEO." "I'm counting on it," Adrian said with a smile. "Turns out I'm good at impossible organizational challenges." Corson was different now. His enhancement from the machine had faded somewhat, but it had left permanent changes. He understood concepts he'd never studied, could see patterns others missed. The Foundation had made him head of exploration, searching for other architect sites without disturbing them. "I found something," he said quietly. "In Mongolia, preliminary scans suggest another machine, maybe even larger than the one on Vialia." "We leave it alone," Adrian said immediately. "I know, but someday when humanity is ready." "When humanity is ready," Isla agreed, "not before." They talked for hours, making plans, sharing dreams, being the friends they'd become through shared trauma and triumph. Eventually, Cerilyn and Corson left, and Adrian and Isla were alone as evening painted the lake in gold and shadow. "I have something to tell you," Isla said, and there was something in her voice that made Adrian's heart race. "Good something or bad something?" "I'm pregnant." The world stopped, then restarted, brighter and more vivid than before. We're going to have a baby." Isla's eyes were bright with tears and joy. "I found out this morning. I wanted to tell you somewhere special, and this seemed perfect. The place where we announced the Foundation. The place where we started building the future." Adrian pulled her close, overwhelmed by emotion. "Our child will grow up in a world we helped create. A world that's learning to be wise, not just powerful." And maybe, Isla said, by the time they're our age, humanity will be ready to return to the machines, ready to join the architects' community, ready to be part of something larger. That's a lot of pressure to put on one kid. Good thing we'll raise them to understand that passing the test isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest and humble and brave enough to keep trying. They sat together as the sun set, two people who'd stumbled into adventure and emerged transformed. They'd found love in chaos. They'd discovered truth in ancient mysteries. They'd passed a test designed to screen out the unworthy and had chosen to share what they'd learned rather than hoard it. And now they would raise a child, the first human who would grow up knowing with certainty that humanity wasn't alone, that the universe held wonders beyond imagining, that wisdom mattered more than power. That night back in their hotel room, Adrian pulled out the original data drive, the one they'd carried across the Pacific, the one that had started everything. They'd kept it as a memento, though its contents had been distributed worldwide. Should we give this to the Foundation, he asked, for their archives? Isla thought about it, then, no, let's keep it, pass it down to our child someday. Let them understand the weight of responsibility that comes with knowledge. Let them understand what we learned. Which is? She smiled, echoing words he'd spoken months ago. That the greatest power is knowing when not to use power, that wisdom matters more than strength, that love and humility and courage, these are what make us truly advanced. Adrian set the drive on the nightstand, this small object that contained the key to humanity's future, or one of the keys anyway. The real key was in how people chose to use the knowledge it contained. So far, humanity was surprising him. The energy technologies had been adopted rapidly, reducing carbon emissions by 20% in just 6 months. The medical advances were being distributed through a global health initiative, reaching regions that had never had access to cutting-edge treatment. There were problems, of course. Some nations tried to weaponize the discoveries, some corporations tried to monopolize them, but the Foundation, with Cerelin's oversight and Corson's diplomatic skills, was managing to keep the knowledge flowing freely. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And progress was all the architects had asked for. 5 years later, Adrian stood on a beach, watching his daughter play in the surf. Elena was 4 years old, brilliant and curious, with her mother's eyes and her father's analytical mind. She built sandcastles that incorporated principles of structural engineering she was too young to consciously understand, but somehow intuited anyway. She's special, Isla said, joining him. She'd taken a position as the Foundation's chief communications officer, crafting the narratives that helped humanity process its place in a larger cosmos. All children are special. You know what I mean, she thinks differently, sees patterns. Yesterday she drew a picture that incorporated architect geometric principles. She's never seen those diagrams. Do you think she was affected somehow? When you were pregnant, we were both exposed to the machine's influence. Maybe, or maybe she's just the first of a new generation. Children who will grow up knowing the universe is vast and full of intelligence, who will learn from the beginning that wisdom matters more than strength. Elena looked up, waved at them with a sandy hand. In that moment, Adrian saw the future, not just his daughter's future, but humanity's. A future where children grew up understanding their place in a larger community, where wisdom was valued as highly as intellect, where the mistakes of the architects served as lessons rather than fate. The Foundation is planning an expedition, Isla said, to the Mongolia site Corson found. They want to attempt communication with the machine there. Are we ready? The Ethics Committee thinks so. They've assembled a team that represents global diversity, trained them in the principles we discovered, prepared them for the test. Will they pass? I don't know, but they'll try, and trying with humility and good intentions, that's what matters. Adrian thought about Vialia Isle, about the machine still waiting beneath the ocean, about Marvith Orin, who'd given her life protecting a secret until the right people came, about the architects, who'd destroyed themselves so thoroughly that only their warnings remained. We should go, he decided, to Mongolia, witness the attempt, document it for the archives. As advisors or as participants? As witnesses, this is humanity's test now, not just ours. We had our moment, now we help others have theirs. They brought Elena with them to Mongolia 3 months later. The architect site was in the Gobi Desert, buried beneath ancient dunes. The Foundation had spent years carefully excavating it, moving slowly, documenting everything, treating the site with the reverence it deserved. The machine here was different from Vialia's, larger, more complex, with additional features that suggested it served a different purpose. Where the Vilia machine seemed designed to test and teach, this one appeared built for communication across vast distances. It's a relay, Coulson explained, his enhanced perception allowing him to understand aspects others could only theorize about. Part of a network. If we activate it properly, we won't just prove ourselves to the architect's remnants. We'll announce ourselves to whatever other species might be listening. The weight of that settled over everyone. They weren't just representing humanity to ancient judges. They were potentially making first contact with alien civilizations that existed right now, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars. The team assembled before the machine at dawn, as protocol suggested. 7 people from 7 continents, each one carefully selected not for their strength or intelligence, but for their wisdom, empathy, and humility. They'd spent months preparing, studying the Ebonreach protocol, understanding what the test really measured. Adrian, Isla, and Coulson watched from a distance, along with hundreds of others, scientists, diplomats, journalists, all of them holding their breath. The team's leader, a woman from Kenya named Amara, approached the machine first. She pressed her palm against its surface and spoke words they'd prepared together. "We are humanity, we are young and flawed. We have hurt each other and our world, but we are learning. We are growing. We are asking not for power but for wisdom, not for dominance but for friendship. We are ready to listen, ready to learn, and ready to join the larger community, if you'll have us." The machine pulsed. And then it sang. Not sound exactly, but something that bypassed ears and spoke directly to the soul. A harmony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carrying meaning that transcended language. Adrian felt tears streaming down his face, though he couldn't have said why. Beside him, Isla gasped, and even Coulson, enhanced, changed, experienced with architect technology, looked awed. The machine showed them visions. Not of the architect's past, but of humanity's potential future. They saw cities that floated among the stars. They saw humans and aliens working together, sharing knowledge, creating art that blended cultures across light years. They saw humanity not as conquerors or children, but as equals, one voice among many in a chorus that sang across the cosmos. And they heard a response, not in words but in pure meaning. "Welcome, we have been waiting. The ARCHITCTS chose well when they PLANTD their seeds. You have PASSED the first test. Now comes the long work of growth. We will help, we will teach, we will walk with you as you learn to fly. Welcome to the greater community. Welcome home." The machine dimmed, the team collapsed, overwhelmed but triumphant. And around the world, as the news spread, humanity celebrated not a conquest but a beginning. That night, in the tent under Mongolian stars that suddenly seemed closer and more friendly, Adrian held Isla and Alina, 3 generations of a species that had just taken its first real step into the cosmos. "We did it," Isla whispered. "We passed." "Humanity passed." Adrian corrected. "We just helped them get there." "What happens now?" "Now we grow, we learn. We become worthy not just of the architect's technology but of their friendship. And someday, maybe our great-great-grandchildren will look back at this moment and understand that everything changed here, that we chose wisdom over power, that we chose together over alone." Alina, drowsy in his arms, murmured, "Tell me a story, Daddy." Adrian thought about all the stories he could tell, about ancient machines and impossible tests, about people who'd sacrificed everything for what mattered, about love that survived danger and wisdom that came from humility. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a species that thought it was alone in the universe, but it wasn't, and when they finally learned the truth, they didn't conquer or claim or control. They listened, they learned, they grew, and they became part of something larger than themselves. The end." "That's not the end," Alina said sleepily. "That's the beginning." "You're right," Adrian kissed his daughter's forehead, marveling at her understanding. "That's the beginning, and the best part, we get to see how the story continues." Under stars that held promises humanity was only beginning to understand, Adrian Vale, former billionaire, current foundation director, always devoted partner to Isla Morno, felt something he'd never experienced before. Complete peace. They'd faced the impossible and survived. They'd found love in chaos. They'd passed tests designed to break the unworthy. And most importantly, they'd chosen to share what they'd learned rather than hoard it. The architects had judged humanity worthy. But more than that, humanity had proven itself worthy of its own future. That was the real victory. That was the real ending. And the real beginning. Far away on Vilia Isle, beneath tons of stone and water, the first machine pulsed with satisfaction. Its creator's faith in the young species had been justified. its long vigil was not ending but entering a new phase. It would wait as humanity grew, guiding when asked, teaching when ready, and eventually, when the species had truly matured, it would reveal its final secret. The architects weren't gone. They were sleeping, waiting for the day when enough young species had passed the test, had proven themselves worthy, had joined the greater community. Waiting for the day when the galaxy would wake again, this time with wisdom to guide its power. That day was coming. The machine could feel it. And it was patient. It had waited 12,000 years. It could wait a little longer. What's one choice you've made that changed the direction of your entire life? Share it below. Your story might inspire someone else.